Welcome back. As we've been saying, today is a very busy one in Washington. Not only is the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, set to speak momentarily with President Biden and then address a joint session of Congress this evening, the Senate is in the midst of voting on a $1.7 trillion spending bill that includes more money for Ukraine, a year's worth of government funding, as well as an overhaul of the Electoral Count Act to eliminate the legal ambiguities that Trump supporters tried to exploit in January 2021. Additionally, border policy is in flux as the pandemic-era Title 42 policy is now in limbo after the Supreme Court temporarily halted its expiration. Joining me now to talk about all of this is Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and a member of the Senate Ukraine Caucus. So, Senator, thank you for being here. We know that President Zelenskyy is set to address Congress tonight. What's your sense of what the U.S. and Ukraine want to accomplish, especially as this visit comes at a critical time in the war?
Well, first, it's just going to be an extraordinary scene tonight. I can't wait to be there. I've gotten to know President Zelenskyy over the years, having traveled there probably over a half dozen times. And remember, this is a leader who most experts thought would be deposed from power within days of the Russian invasion, a leader that many told he was told to flee to avoid capture or execution. He didn't flee. He stood his ground, and that is the reason, in large part, today that Ukraine is winning battles against Russia. I think the message here is twofold. One, it's to the Ukrainian people that the United States stands shoulder to shoulder with them. This is a day in which President Zelenskyy will appear before Congress. It is also a day in which we will authorize $46 billion in new funding to support their war. The message is also to Europe that we're not going away, and we hope that the Europeans are going to stick with us. And lastly, it's a message to Putin. Putin's going to be very upset, angry, embarrassed tonight. This is a war he thought he could win within weeks, and he's going to see a united front between Ukraine and the American people, and a signal that we're going to stick with Ukraine for the long haul.
And, Senator, we have heard some senators, including down the Democratic and Republican side, saying just what you said, which is that the U.S. is going to stick with Ukraine in the long haul. But you've also seen, in some ways, Republicans who are incoming, House Republicans, saying that they are worried about how much aid Ukraine is getting. What's your sense of the support inside the Congress for Ukraine and how that could change?
I think one of the big reasons why we are approving $46 billion in aid this week is because there's not a lot of trust that House Republicans care about Ukraine in the way that America cares about Ukraine. You have heard signals from the incoming Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy that there won't be a lot of support for Ukraine from his caucus. So the $46 billion that we're authorizing right now, it's a lot of money, but it's a lot of money because we expect it to be enough to last Ukraine for all of or most of next year, so that we don't have to rely on these unreliable House Republicans who are coming into the majority.
And another thing that I want to ask you about when it comes to Ukraine is, of course, the Patriot missile systems that the United States is saying it's going to provide. What's your sense of your support for that move? And also, do you think there should be more given to Ukraine, given the fact that we know Ukraine is pushing to get more?
So I think we've been very clear with Russia from the beginning of two things. One, there's not going to be American troops in Ukraine. We don't seek a direct conflict with Russia. And two, we are going to be somewhat judicious about the systems we transfer to Ukraine. We're not going to enable Ukraine to carry out attacks in Russia. But we've also been very clear we're going to help Ukraine protect itself. And right now, Russia's tactic is to target civilians, is to target civilian infrastructure, to try to kill Ukrainian children and families by starving them to death or to have them freeze in their homes. We've got to provide Ukraine the mechanism to protect their civilians. And right now, it's the Patriot that is probably the best way to shoot these Russian missiles out of the sky. So I know that Zelenskyy is always pushing the envelope. That's his job. He should do that. But I think it still makes sense for the United States to draw these two basic lines: no American troops on the ground there, and being careful to provide defensive weapons, not weapons that are going to be used in attacks inside Russia.
And then that last point about weapons that could be used inside Russia, do you think the U.S. should be sending long-range missiles to Ukraine as they are requesting the United States do?
Listen, I think we're going to continue to be in a dialogue with them about what systems they need and how they are going to use them. Again, I am very comfortable with the two bottom lines that I articulated, but there may be situations in which they need more missile capacity to just protect their own territory and hit targets inside Ukraine. So let's continue this dialogue. I'm sure we'll all be very eager to hear the recommendations that President Zelenskyy has tonight.
And Senator, we've been talking about democracy in Ukraine. I want to ask you about democracy here. The omnibus is going to have this reform for the Electoral Count Act. How significant is that?
It's really significant. This is an 1887 law that governs how the Electoral College works. And what we found out in 2020 is that there are a lot of vulnerabilities. Now, Trump wasn't able to successfully exploit any of them. But, for instance, you saw this ambiguity over, could the vice president actually cast a vote? Could they cancel votes out when they're presiding over the Senate? Well, we took all those potential ambiguities and we got rid of them. So Republicans and Democrats wrote a new version of the Electoral Count Act, which makes it very clear that states have to abide by their law for picking electors, and they can't change up their electors just because they don't like how the election turned out. So this limits the avenues for a corrupt presidential candidate like Donald Trump to try to steal the election. It doesn't eliminate that possibility, I'll be honest, but it just narrows the avenues that somebody like Trump would have to try to steal an election after the vote is counted.
And in thinking of that, is your sense that this is going to be the only legislative action that Congress will take to try to prevent another Capitol attack, or might there be even more ways to try to narrow that possibility?
Well, we beef up some of the aspects of the budget that try to track these terror groups, these domestic terror groups. So there, are going to be new capacities in this budget to try to root out groups that are planning attacks against the United States Capitol. We are going to, open back up for business next year. We still have limited access, and I think you will, see, increased security here. And of course, it just helps to have a president who wants to defend the Capitol rather than Donald Trump, a president who was willing to let us all die on January 6th.
Strong words, Senator, but I know there are a lot of people who agree with you. Finally, Title 42, the border policy. What should Congress and the Biden administration be doing to prepare for its possible end there? What do you want to see happening?
Well, let's just be clear. This is a problem created by congressional inaction. Congress hasn't passed any comprehensive immigration reform because Republicans have blocked it, and thus we have basically an ongoing crisis at the border because we have tons of people showing up, and we don't have the right pathways with which to process them. We're going to have a lot of people coming to the United States once Title 42 is lifted. That's the authority that we used under COVID to expel migrants without allowing them to make an asylum claim. The law of the United States says you can only use that authority when there's a COVID emergency. Without the COVID emergency, you've got to allow people to apply for asylum, and we need resources to process those asylum claims. We put about $2.5 billion in this budget to help with those high numbers of people arriving at the budget, but that number probably should have been twice as much. Again, Republicans were only willing to agree to this amount. So I think you're going to see some troubling images at the border in January and February and March, and that can be solved by increased resources that Republicans are unwilling to provide us, or comprehensive immigration reform, which so far Republicans have been unwilling to pass.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Chris Murphy. A lot to talk about there.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.